In the far northwest of Cambodia, near the Thai border, a forgotten giant lies half swallowed by the jungle. This is Banteay Chhmar, and unlike most ancient ruins, it doesn't feel distant. It feels unfinished, like history caught mid-sentence. Most temples are preserved behind ropes and signage, polished into monuments. Banteay Chhmar is different. Its walls are broken, its carvings are worn. Silence runs deeper than almost any other site in Cambodia. It doesn't reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself piece by piece, the way memory does. And yet, this was once one of the most important temple complexes in the entire Khmer Empire. Banteay Chhmar was built in the late 12th century under King Jayavarman VII. This was a king who came to power after his empire had been shaken by invasion and crisis. And his answer was an extraordinary building campaign. Temples, roads, rest houses, reservoirs stretched across the land, binding the empire together. Banteay Chhmar was part of that vision, a key node in a vast network connecting cities and power across the Khmer world. But while Angkor stayed at the center of history, Banteay Chhmar drifted to the margins. And in doing so, it became something else entirely. You don't see its scale from a distance. The forest presses in close, paths twist through dense vegetation, and there's no grand causeway preparing you for what's ahead, no long avenue of statues, leading the eye toward a perfect symmetrical facade, the way some other Khmer sites are designed to overwhelm a visitor from the first step. Instead, the temple appears in fragments, a wall here, collapsed tower there, carved stones surfacing through roots and earth, half claimed by the forest floor. It feels less like entering a monument and more like uncovering one, as though you're the first person to notice it in years. Even though you're walking the same ground, countless visitors have walked before you. Then, slowly, the scale starts to register. The outer walls stretch more than a kilometer on each side, large enough that from ground level, you can never quite see where they end. Reservoirs once surrounded the complex, mirroring the towers and the sky above them. Part of a water system that shaped both the practical and ceremonial life of the site, long galleries wind through the complex, their walls covered in carvings, not just gods and myths, but scenes of human life, war, and devotion. And it's in these carvings that Banteay Chhmar finds its voice. Where the reliefs at Angkor Wat are carefully preserved, clean lines, legible scenes, a story you can read from start to finish, the carvings here are worn, broken, incomplete. Faces have faded. Details have softened into suggestion rather than depiction. Whole sections have collapsed, leaving gaps where stone simply isn't there anymore. But that incompleteness is exactly what gives them power. Armies march across cracked stone, rows of soldiers frozen mid-stride, elephants move through battle scenes. Their forms still recognizable even where the surrounding stone has eroded away. Ritual figures seem to emerge and dissolve at the same time, fully carved in one section. Ghost-like outlines in the next, as if the stone itself is remembering rather than recording. Scholars still debate the temple's exact purpose. Some believe it honored fallen members of the royal family, perhaps even princes lost in battle, a monument not just to gods, but to people. Others see it as a religious outpost, reinforcing the king's presence at the edge of his empire, a statement of power and protection placed deliberately near the frontier. It may have been both. What's certain is that Banteay Chhmar was never meant to stand alone. It was one piece of a living map of Khmer identity at its height, connected by roads and shared belief to temples hundreds of kilometers away. Today, that map is fading. Much of Banteay Chhmar remains unrestored. Sections have collapsed under their own weight, pulled down slowly by gravity, roots, and centuries of monsoon rains. And in the past, looting removed many of the temple's most intricate sculptures. Entire carved panels cut away and smuggled out, some of which now sit in museums far from the forest that shaped them, identified only by where they were taken from. It's a loss that's easy to feel standing in front of an empty wall where a carving clearly used to be. The outline of what's missing, sometimes more visible than what remains, but what's left here isn't diminished, it's something else. Without crowds, without barriers, without the polished surfaces of a fully restored site, you can feel time itself at work. It's in the cracks running through the stone blocks, fine lines spreading slowly across surfaces that have stood for 8 centuries. It's in the roots that wrap around the walls, strangler fig roots. Thick as human limbs, holding the stones together and pulling them apart in the same motion. Growth and decay happening simultaneously in front of you. It's in the open spaces where rooms once stood, now filled with nothing but sky, dappled light, and birdsong. If you've seen Angkor Wat or heard of Sambar Pray Kuk, you might be wondering how Banteay Chhmar fits into that picture. Each of these places tells a different chapter of the same story. Angkor overwhelms with scale, its causeways, moats, and towers built to project the absolute power of an empire at its peak. Sambar Pray Kuk, by contrast, feels like an origin point, an early capital where Khmer architectural style was still being invented. Octagonal towers and brick construction laying the groundwork for everything that came later. Banteay Chhmar sits at neither extreme. It's the space between creation and dissolution, the point where a civilization's intentions slowly become something else. Presence, memory, and quiet continuity. If Sambar Pray Kuk shows you where the story began, and Angkor shows you the story at its height, Banteay Chhmar shows you what happens to a story afterward, how it ages, fragments, and is partially reclaimed. The Khmer built with precision, ambition, and cosmic intent. Temples were aligned with sacred geography, designed to reflect ideas about order and the universe itself. But time doesn't preserve intention, it reshapes it. What survives isn't always what was meant to last. Some walls at Banteay Chhmar still stand at their original height. Others lie scattered across the forest floor in pieces, toppled by roots or simply by the slow accumulation of centuries. The carvings offer fragments, not full stories, a battle scene that ends mid-action, a procession of figures that trails off into bare stone, and yet those fragments still carry weight. Each one is a piece of evidence, a clue toward understanding, a moment in history that was never fully written down to begin with. Because history isn't a finished record, something we piece back together from what remains at Banteay Chhmar, more literally than almost anywhere else. Walking through Banteay Chhmar, you eventually stop trying to understand everything and start simply noticing what's still here. A carved figure half buried in moss, visible only if the light hits it at the right angle. A doorway that leads nowhere, opening onto a pile of collapsed stone instead of a room. A long corridor that simply opens into silence. No carvings, no markers, just walls, shadow, and the sound of insects in the heat. Each piece feels like part of a larger story that can never be fully told, and maybe that's the point. This isn't a finished statement, it's an open question about legacy, about the relationship between human hands and natural forces, and about how we choose to remember something that was never meant to be forgotten in the first place. This isn't decline, it's transformation, and within it, there's a quiet kind of resilience. The temple doesn't stand the way it once did, but it still stands, shaped now as much by the centuries after the empire as by the empire itself. Wind, rain, roots, and heat have all left their mark on every surface, every wall, every fallen block, and somehow, through all of that, the structure endures. There's no overwhelming display of power here, no attempt to dominate the landscape the way some monuments do. It's just balance, stone and forest, sharing the same space. Past and present, overlapping in every direction you look, silence carrying more weight than sound ever could. And that's exactly why Banteay Chhmar matters. It reminds us that what survives isn't always what was strongest, most visible, or most celebrated at the time it was built. Sometimes what survives is simply what adapts, what blends into its surroundings instead of resisting them, what becomes part of something larger than the original plan ever accounted for. Banteay Chhmar doesn't compete with Angkor, it completes it, showing the empire not just at the height of its power, but in its long, quiet continuation. Not as a symbol of permanence frozen in time, but as part of a longer, ongoing process that includes both creation and change, building and weathering, intention and memory. It's a different kind of monument, not one that demands attention, one that rewards it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey, hit like, subscribe to Ancient Origins, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next mystery we explore. Every week, we uncover another chapter of humanity's forgotten story, carved in stone, hidden in the landscape, and waiting to be understood. If you feel drawn to places like this, you belong here. Thank you for watching. Until our next discovery, stay curious.